Hello, and welcome to the National Michael Chekhov Association's talk on technology, techies, and why technicians can benefit from learning Michael Chekhov's technique. And today we have four of us here. Myself, I am Lisa Dalton, the president and one of the master teachers of the National Michael Chekhov Association. We have our colleague, Charlie Bowles, who is our executive producer. Charlie, please say hello.
Hello.
And Charlie does quite a bit of technology himself, especially in the audiovisual realm. And we have one of our NMCA certified design candidates, Pablo Guerra Monje. Pablo, will you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm a beginner student of Michael Chekhov, but I've been working on design and teaching here in Arkansas, and yeah, this is I'm a really fan of Michael Chekhov and design. I can see lots of ways in which the designs aspect can be lead by the Michael Chekhov process.
Beautiful. And with us, we have Mavis Jennings, and Mavis is one of our newest candidates, teacher and directing candidate. And Mavis is responsible for creating this event because it is his interest and inquiry into furthering this question of how or why, really, why might technicians want to know about Michael Chekhov's work. So Mavis, will you share us please a little bit in detail about your performance and music and directing background that brings this context forward?
Sure. Background on myself is just that I grew up in a rural area well outside of show business or any kind of theater or any kind of arts. And so I was always concocting or say devising what art was for me from a very pure, natural, instinctive place. And it was very long. It was a very long time until college days where I was first introduced to it, the contextual idea of organized art training. And after moving to New York City, I obtained a job as a singer and an artist with Cirque du Soleil. And I received a lot of training from Cirque du Soleil in a context that was very similar to Michael Chekhov technique, but it was under the Jacques Lecoq School of Training.
Yes.
I found after I left Cirque du Soleil and I came for an MFA at Kent State University, I found that Michael Chekhov technique very much so communicated to my instinctive way of thinking about art and thinking about the world and what it was I wanted to say. I then took in the training that we did this past summer, I was able to sort of take the ball and run with it in some ways because I sort of became a bit unhealthy in my feelings about my future and my art. And it seemed like everything was in the past, and somehow some of these simple exercises unlocked a certain path forward for me artistically. And I couldn't say enough about what what this technique does, not only for us to enable an actor to be more inside themselves and to be more authentic in a role, to be more inspired, but also what it does for an actor's health and for an artist's health and for an artist's ability to gain trust in their inspiration. Those three I's were very important to me: the inspiration, the imagination, and the intellect. Very important for me to get back on my feet and get going again. I was approached by an old friend who was very much so enamored by the Cirque du Soleil technique of creating a fusion between technical theater and the artistic movement and gymnastics, acrobatics on the stage. And he was a professor at Berklee School of Music and moved up and was just recently granted the ability to create this new school in New York City that has the mandate or the aim to raise the level of technical theater or to innovate technical theater. And he asked me I was just out of the blue. I was in my studio, my COVID studio, writing a new screenplay. And he asked me to contribute to his promotion video, which I did. And he used my little snippet there, and I was just shocked. But then all of a sudden, this little seed was planted. It's like, I should teach there. And I thought to myself of the times when I was a grad assistant at Kent State, I did have the opportunity to teach the technical students acting technique. However, I had no clue as to how to bring them in on the why. And being such an enthusiastic how person I am, like somebody says, like, try this, I'll be like, well, how do you do it? I'd always wanted to do everything. That's just my way, but I'm not a technician. My way is not everybody else's way. And I had no clue on how to bring in the why into that studio. And it was just a mess, sincere mess. It was like, they didn't enjoy the class. I didn't enjoy being with them in the class. And it had me scratching my head. The next section I got to teach 2 sections was mostly young, like new actors. They were freshmen and they were much more enthusiastic. During the summer, when on the last talk that you did, so thorough, thank you so much for the training. This summer changed my life sincerely. But on the last day of the talks, when we sat at your table, Lisa, and you took us through those things, the why, how, and what of the artistic mind, and how do we bring people on board? It was very shocking to me. I don't know if you remember, but I choked and I went I choked on my water. It was because of this very, very, very subject. So I've been trying to get my head around this, how to not only bring the why, find a why to bring to the students, because I know it's important. Instinctively, I know it's important, but I couldn't find the word. I've been trying to search, and now, oh my God, here's Pablo shaking his head yes, and he's doing this. What a blessing. Thank you so much. And I will stop talking. Listen.
That's great. So I do want to bring Pablo in and just invite you, Pablo, if you have a point to launch in, or if...
Yes,
Right.
I do. I'm going directly to the why. And the why is an urgent matter for this school. The why is the difference between them succeeding or failing in storytelling. The why is really important for the art that they want to, this new breed of designers that they're talking about. Well, those breed of designers, this is urgent because depending on those breed of designers, they can be acting against a storytelling. It's not only that is important or something like that. This is just needed. It's a must need to happen if they really want to do a new breed of designers. If they want to bring more layers of the American theater, the famous 100 layers that we have, but that lack unity and really are against a storytelling. Because if they want to say that their students are artists, or if they tell their students they are artists and they convince them that they are artists and they are not, this is going to be a mess, because they're going to, we are coming back to this moment in history where, similar to the Baroque, where more elements of spectacle are added and added and added, and the storytelling gets smaller, smaller, smaller. If they want to do visual and auditory art, they can call it more, I don't know what would the name be, like this. In the Baroque times, they have a name for it. The people will go to the theater to see these spectacles. If they want to do just a spectacle for a spectacle, that's fine, and they will be artists if they want to call themselves that. But without and I have some notes here, without the sensibility toward the actor, toward the director, toward the storytelling process, if they lack that, and they lack the intellectual capacity of finding the why the story is told, and they lack the investment in art, which I'm sure they will get that, hopefully, right?
Mhm.
But if this is a storytelling school, uh, and they don't get trained or exposed, right? Because this is just going to be exposure. It's not that it's going to be like a class that they're taking in the curriculum. There is not going to be a major class, right, for them, because they're going to be technicians.
Yes.
But they must take a class that emphasize on storytelling. And I think um, Michael Chekhov is great because it brings the the moment, the study of the moment, and it brings the idea of the let me see, the how and the see I'm see, that's why they need to take the class. I need to take the class too, so we can share a vocabulary here. So
Yeah.
the inspire moment, right?
Yes. Yes. I
The
understand.
inspire moment.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the inspire moment. And in the video, they say that they are entrepreneurs, and the person who knows how to run the technology is going to run the design aspects, because if they don't hire a designer and there is a small gig, like a roadhouse that brings people,
Yeah.
the technician ends up designing the the looks of the venue, mostly in music. If they don't have that connection with the storytelling, they are just being technicians designing, and that's a bad deal.
Hmm.
That's a bad deal because they are going to, they might interfere with the story. They might have too many layers. They might create confusion. They might not know where the climaxes are. They might not know where the motivations are. They might not know all the, help me with vocabulary, Lisa. All of those things that you need to
All the
know.
events. Yeah, all the
The
events.
events, the
Yeah.
events, the arch of the story.
Yes.
If
Very
they don't understand that, not only they are going to create monsters, because what's going to happen is that we are going to uh, have this abusive abusive visual and auditory world that is like not in link with what really needs to be told, right? There has to be a balance. I wrote Lisa because I am getting really frustrated when in the production team they add more and more um, technical people that are not investing in the storytelling. They are just thinking of how to solve the technical problems, and they are added to the production team to create the show. But since they lack that sensibility, they almost harming actors in the and directors. So
Yes.
I was telling Lisa, we just need to create a new to have a stage manager for actors and director and the director, and to have a design manager, a person that is going to oversee all the work of these new artist technicians, because I'm sure they are technicians, but they have to prove they are artists. You know, they have to prove themselves as artists. You cannot tell them that they're artists until they are not, because if not, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, add color, add movement, add effects. Look what can I do? How fancy it is. Imagine in the Baroque. fly, hide, move, that. But we are moving from that. I believe we are getting outside that visual era finally for saturation.
Absolutely.
We're starting the performative era in which the balance of the old school story elements need to be protected just by knowing them, right? Because they are, if they this is what are they studying at the school? They're studying tools.
Yes.
That's the only thing they're studying.
Yeah.
Tools for what? For storytelling. Or because even now music, concerts and everything, they emphasize the storytelling. They want to tell a story through the concert.
Mhm.
So in corporative events, they want to tell a story. So everybody wants to tell a story now. Like everybody wants to be part of the story. There's no, and that's great. I think that's great. But we have to be find the moment, the historical moment that we are, and don't make the mistakes of the Baroque that sweep the Renaissance and all that uh, is, is a, excitement about theater, in England and Spain, like it was just like everybody, and make it more for, let's throw more money on it so we have more spectacle. So what? The story starts to disappear in the spectacle. Just you cannot see it through so many layers. So if they're telling tools, they need to know how to. They're gonna know how to use the tool, but how to use the tool for storytelling. How to use the tool, the why, how, what, right?
Yes.
The why are you throwing it there, like why that intensity, why that length, why that, if you are not saving for the climax, or you are not anticipating the climax, or like you are making too many climaxes, or
Mhm.
or basic things, and they talk about the interconnection that they're going to teach those guys, right? They're going to be super interconnected among the tools. But what about the real thing that they came to do, right? If I teach somebody how to be a carpenter, and they know all the tools and they know how to do everything, but if we don't agree on what do we need to build, what's the point, So I think this is dangerous what they're doing if they don't take a step back and think about that they might uh, end up saturating their own market so fast. Look at the images in the video themselves. They are overwhelming and confusing,
Together, I was actually surprised I was in the video, that I
Yeah.
made the video, because I
Oh,
didn't really see my
totally.
through line as to like why would they would bring a Cirque du Soleil performer to talk about this school. I was honored to have been chosen to be in the video, but
I think the Cirque du Soleil might be a good example because they have a balance between the story and now how the technology can help to tell the story, right?
well, I would like to say that in the little segment there that you spoke, it seemed as if you were almost describing the history of Cirque du Soleil, because when it began, it was very much so like this, the balance. There was a director that had a vision, Franco Dragon, who had a vision of telling the story, and everyone was submitted to that task.
Yeah.
After time and after many billions of dollars made, a lot of those entrepreneurs went on just to create their own little segments of creativity. And what was coming in were more technicians that were more of people who just to sort of keep it going or add more. And when Cirque du Soleil tried to innovate and bring 2 Broadway shows to New York City, they both were dismal failures, because what was happening there was essentially just a lot of like tricks and this and glitz and like you say, it was all spectacular. And the storyline was very difficult. There was a storyline, but it was hard to see. It was very difficult to track because it was like you were blinded to it. And so yes, they lost their way. I mean, of course, they're under bankruptcy now, and who knows where they might go. Maybe they'll start. Someone will buy it. Who knows what the future holds for that company? But they had certainly, in the time that I was with them for nearly 17 years, and in the time that I was with the company, it started to become more and more of a how many of these amazing effects people will like the effects, like how many effects can we throw on this, because the storylines seem to take a back seat and then take a further back seat and then take a further back seat until almost it was very difficult to even see that there was a storyline to begin with. And the brand was very popular. The brand name of Cirque du Soleil would sell those tickets, and people started, continued coming. It reminded me of the history, because I was teaching theater history at Kent State, and the theater history of the Ziegfeld Follies, who it was like the ticket to have back in the day, before the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
No one would ever have thought that the Ziegfeld Follies would lose their way, and they only or would lose their popularity. I mean, it was the ticket to have in New York City. But sooner or later, people just became tired of these beautiful pictures with no storyline, and they started going to see, like you just said, like this Renaissance. They wanted to they'd prefer to be in a space where there was essentially lights on, lights off, and very simple sets, and have a very poignant story that reflected their lives, that inspired them, that perhaps like gave them courage, and all the things that storylines can do in the theater. They're very intimate, soul-changing experiences one can have in those kind of settings.
Mm-hmm.
As Cirque du Soleil was in its early inception.
Yes, like Bob Wilson, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what they love him in Europe, because he has unity and he has spectacle. Is a lot of spectacle, but it's so linked to the story, and it's his all his all in his head, and he's just an artist, no?
Mm-hmm.
But Joseph Svoboda, the light designer, Joseph Svoboda, he creates new lights as a technician, to help to tell his stories, this of keeping adding layers and effects and that. I mean, you are in a great position to convince them, because you've been in Cirque du Soleil, and you have lived through that, from a balance to an unbalance.
Yes.
So you can tell it, I come here to protect the balance.
Yeah. Yes.
So they know.
Yeah.
So at least if they are told to do that, they know as artists that what they are doing, because they will think, and I'm sure a lot of the designers in Cirque du Soleil, we are artists and artists of another type of spectacle, but no of storytelling, right?
Yes.
And if you miss the storytelling in the mix, you miss the most important piece, right? Because
Absolutely.
the actors is the most important piece at the end of the day. We are just to help to tell the story. If we help too much, we don't do them a favor. All the opposite.
Yeah, you put a curtain in front of the story. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you just have to tell them, like, dude, don't hire me if you don't want to, but you have to open this position, because there has to be somebody protecting the process. And Michael Chekhov, what Michael Chekhov has, I think, is like this theatrical rational, it's like reason, but applied to theater, like reason, like it makes sense,
Oh, absolutely. The path to inspired action is extremely, very much so makes sense. Yeah. And
it makes sense.
I mean, once you go through the training, you know, the light turns on and you see it. You have to study it to understand the sense of it.
Yes.
Yeah. And not only study it, but practice it and see how it works in more than one way.
Yeah.
It does
because
work.
because I love Lecoq, and that's how it started. And so
Are you-
I'm not good. I'm a generalist and I don't know anything, but I think Lecoq don't go so into the whole picture. It stays more with the actor. It stays more with the with the with the. I know her daughter tried to do a school there in Paris of design.
Yeah.
And it was great with those. But it doesn't have the rationale that Michael Chekhov have, you know, the steps, the whole picture, the from the action analysis from the script to the performance and to the sensibility,
What is happening? So sorry.
I was thinking lately when a lot of issues, we have an issue here with Title IX and intimacy in the theater and stuff. And I was like, man, if we will follow Michael Chekhov, these things will be way less likely to happen too, you know. Like, and this, I'm just going out of the thing, but yeah.
No, yeah, I think also just to be, I've thought about this thing about Lecoq, and I've thought about Lecoq and Chekhov, and I've seen, for me, what's missing from the Lecoq training, and I read his two of his books. I think the Four Brothers, and a sense of the whole, and a sense of beauty, form, ease. Like these are things that are, as a group, that they're missing, that are consequential, enormously consequential to creating an inspired performance. That's why most of the clowns that I personally know that are good friends of mine, they're such solo artists. And they're solo, even their lives are solo. They live alone, they perform alone. If they do get in a team, it's a team that never changes. And if someone dies, it's like that, it's over, like the whole thing is over.
And they are so good, but they're so alone, right?
Yes, yes.
They are better than anybody, but they are alone.
Yeah. It's not a happy life at the end of the day. It's not. No.
But thinking about how to introduce technicians, you know, and technicians, yes, they're close to the design and stuff, but I think Michael Chekhov brings a more pathway, more structure, you know, curriculum.
Yeah.
You want to call it, because it just makes sense. Yeah.
If you were to use the Michael Chekhov technique in a room full of designers, and you're asking them to, like, you know, put on their flexible clothes and to do the PPEs and to do like, and maybe maybe it was my passion, or maybe it was something about me in that room with those people that I couldn't seem to get them to be enthusiastic about that. They had worn this leather of I'm a technician, this is stupid actor stuff. How do you break down that barrier?
Okay, you gotta maybe do like a introductory class onto put them in their place, right? And ask them, do you love theater? Or do you love what is theater? You know?
Yeah.
Who is the main? What are we doing here as designers? Are we telling a story, or we're helping to tell a story? Right?
Yeah.
And then more understanding that at the end of the day, the magic of incarnation, you know, it comes from the actor. That this is a secret business that is being sacred until the Renaissance. All before, you know, theater history, right? It's all been linked to the mystery, you know?
Yeah.
Do you want to be with the mystery, or do you want to be with the spectacle? Because if you want to be with the spectacle, there is no maybe you are not going to enjoy this, but if you do if you do with them the exercises of the going to the web, you know, how was it, the cloud of the imagination and stuff?
Yes, I love that exercise.
Did you do that with them?
Yeah, it's helped me a lot. Oh no, I did not do that. I did that with Lisa this summer. Lisa.
Yeah, because that one will engage them quickly, that exercise. You know, mm, use it to say, empower them into their imagination, to develop their imagination, like the imagination as a muscle that you have to practice. And what happened is that when I was young, I don't know if you were young or not, but research was hard, you know, going to the library.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember, right? You have to trace those things, or
Absolutely.
but now research is so easy, you know, that some of these they are losing a little bit of the imagination in the shapes, in the forms. So maybe giving them something, you know, to engage them and say, hey, these techniques are gonna help you to come back to what you already have, because it's right there.
Yes.
You have to access it. It's like, and is the perfect way to understand it with the web, right?
Yeah.
Like, do research in your imagination.
Yes.
You have way more than you think.
And also the research with your imagination is going to bring out your individual, something that's only yours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something new.
Yeah. And tell them how wonderful is work collaboratively, how fulfilling is to really understand the process of the actors and the directors, and that's what the fun is, really. Like, if we bring this balance, you know.
Yeah.
Like this modern insensibility toward the actor, you know.
Yes.
It just goes against what we're doing, you know.
And
So,
it's so prevailing, isn't it?
Yeah, so prevalent with the spectacle and stuff, but we are getting saturated. I mean, we've seen everything already with the you know, we've seen cats in a hat in Russia, you know, we've seen everything now, you know.
Yes.
It's like there's no, and this like, you can tell them, like, we need to talk now a little bit about the audience. I think, you know, what's the experience of the audience?
Yes.
How do they leave the theater? Do they leave it like tired, like when you go to watch one of these superhero movies?
Yes.
That you are like, oh my God, you know, I was really entertained to the bone that I could not. You're almost like dizzy and tired, you know, instead of being focused and purposeful, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I think is going to end up becoming like superhero movies on a stage, you know. And
absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll do a little bit of a wrap up to bring us back to the kind of the answers of the why, and then we can kind of get into some of the aims and the challenges that we have to deal with in the technical world and everything. Well, these kind of 6 things are things that I have embodied from my Chekhov training and from my experiences over the last 10, 11 years. They are really the specific things that I carry with me into every project that I work on, regardless of what it's for in terms of kind of a production thing. So probably the most important lesson that I ever learned from Chekhov, and there are many, many, many of them, was beef.
Beef?
If you're in the technical world, you had better damn well learn beef. Because if you cannot handle the pressures involved in the high stakes technical world, especially as it's now being integrated in the media that we have today. It's very difficult on the person, on the tech, and it's also really difficult on the rest of the production crew and eventually on the audience. And we see that all of the time. If we take a look at various and sundry projects that we watch online, you know, the most prevalent phrase in human language right now is "you're on mute." Literally, if you were to count the probably countless millions of times that phrase is posed in the midst of meetings or whatever, it surpasses everything else. And that comes from a function of just not being present in the media that you happen to be working in at the time. So for me, part of beauty is something that you just kind of generally see. That's a perspective on the world. And you incorporate that. Okay, well, everything looks like crap at this moment, but I see the overall beauty of it. Form kind of comes from the design philosophy or whatever. What are we trying to accomplish here? What kind of a medium is it? Form kind of is given to the text as a beginning, and then they work within that form to try to make everything work right. But for me, ease and entirety are the two absolute keys. If I don't have ease, and I can tell you that there must have been 1,000 times this last weekend when I essentially spent 48 hours in a continuous online in-person production. I must have said, take it easy, be cool, be calm, relax, calm down, because there was constant crises going on, and ease was the tool that I had to have all the time. And then the entirety function of beef is I want to see the overall production, everything that's going on as a complete entire production. I want those people, and the people who I was working with this weekend have no idea what entirety means. And so they're all very focused on tiny little piece parts of what they're doing. And there was no overall director of the whole production. And therefore, it was a lot of little conglomerate projects going on that we had to try to pull together. And so trying to keep the idea of entirety across the entire technical staff is really crucial and critical. You've also heard me do speeches before, numerous of the workshops, and probably I think I may have missed the workshop that you were in, and so I'm not sure that you saw it. However, you will remember that in that speech, the opening speech, I talk about spiritual purpose. I talk about the idea that we began becoming performers 50,000 years ago, and it is in our DNA all the way up until now. We are driven to perform, we're driven to communicate, but more importantly, we are driven to share our spiritual purpose. Whether that's religious or not, that's a whole different discussion. I don't care about that. I don't believe that religious fervor was any part of Michael Chekhov's idea of spirit. His spirit was, how do I get my heart out there and my thoughts and my meanings out there into the audience so that they then can turn around and take that and share that elsewhere. And from everything that we do in any of the workshops that we do, that idea of passing on the spiritual the spiritual magnificence of humanity to everybody who we work with and perform for, that's high critically important purpose to do it. And it leads to the whole context of an important piece for the technical crew, whether they are designers or technicians or people running and pulling cables. I am a creative artist. We have to incorporate that into their thinking so that they realize that they are part and parcel of the production. They are as important as anybody out there, and anybody in that production that cannot separate, that tries to separate the actor's purpose and the technician's purpose is simply working against the production. You cannot operate that way. Everybody is part of the production. Everybody depends on everybody else. And, we are kind of relearning that in the challenges of the human condition that we are all going through right now. The next thing is that an important tool that everything that we teach in Michael Chekhov and everything that he taught was that it gives us a common language that we are able to share with each other. And so if you are in a production, we of course do this very quickly within our workshops, because very quickly we get on the same wavelength with the languages. And that's why we share so much of the context of what we're talking about, is because we are having this discussion now in the context of that language, which began with Chekhov's teachings. We understand what those are. And if we can create that within a production team, then everybody speaks in a common language, and everything goes much faster and much smoother. Everybody is communicating, understanding what everybody means by something. Whether they agree or not doesn't matter, but they understand at least what somebody is saying. In all of my productions, I have felt, and I kind of understand how it has happened, that there's this design gulf, the gulf between design and art. And the fact of the matter is, it should be, and it is, the fact that every person on that production team, top to bottom, is an artist. And as Mavis had said, each of them contribute their own creative individuality to the production. And that includes, the tech sitting there on a board, monitoring levels. They're listening through their ears. They're determining what the audience hears because of what they themselves hear. And so there's a judgment process that's going on through all of that in the actual designer who sits down and draws out the stage plot. The person who creates the lighting plots, that is their judgment. That's design, and that is artistry at the highest level. And it's important that the actors and the people who are involved in just acting understands that they're not the only ones there who are creating art. Their art only works within the context of the art of the entire production. And so the last thing I'll talk about, the why, is I think the most important part that Chekhov has created for me as a person who thinks about 90% of the time about the technicalities of things is that it helps me overcome the crises. There are crises in every single production, bar none. If I hear somebody say, oh, we never had a crisis, I'm going to say, well, then you're keeping your eyes closed, because there are crises in every single production that ever happens out there. And it's not that you have a crisis, it's how you deal with the crisis. And so I think that's, for me, a huge overriding benefit to how Chekhov sees the world, last thing I'll say about this, and we can talk about kind of the aims of what we would like to get out of this, is that I am totally okay with spectacle as long as it is part of and integrated into the job of telling the story. The thing that we have, what you talked about, Pablo, is that we have all seen everything. Well, what we have all seen everywhere, everything are millions and millions of little snippets of TikTok or little tiny, this is my moment of time in the sun or whatever. And there's no real purpose for it other than to show how cool I am or how great I am or, how I look or how I can dance or whatever. It's not telling a story. It's just showing who I am. And that's the thing I think we want to get away from in the whole technical realm, is creating spectacle, because that's what the tool happens to be able to do. We need to create the tools that we're going to use after we know what the purpose of the story is, so that we can then customize the tools to make the story come across. So those are my ideas for now, and I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Charlie, so much. Charlie, I want to turn it back over to Pablo, because I think Pablo's got a class that he needs to go to.
Yes.
So we will continue this conversation, and of course you'll get the link to the video, Pablo.
Great.
But before you leave, is there anything else you want to share? I mean, it's been fantastic. I feel like I've been experiencing a master class here. So
I really like what Charlie said, and that's what I was trying to say before, that idea, and I didn't say it, but it's true that some of that letter that you, Demian, said, that Midas says, that the designers put on, is also not to be hurt, because sometimes they are pushed away. And one of the things that Charlie said, you can empower them to know that they have the right of their spiritual contribution, right? That they have a right of their spiritual contribution, that they have to fight for the right, instead of protecting themselves and saying, I'm just like, I'm a techie, drink my beers, because they want that. Everybody wants connection. And there is no better connection than here. And they are, a lot of times, they get into that defensive, because we blame them when something fails. In the technical world, as Charlie said, is just so many things can go wrong, and technology and stuff. And I like what he says, that overcoming crisis, like that reliance to adversity, because at the end of the day, it's a spiritual, and in that sense, there is no really bad doing. There's nothing is wrong. Everything is perfect because it had to be that way. And so maybe one of the things that you can contribute to that school is to empower those new designers to really be part of this the common language. Of course, I don't know if they will be using that language, but they can spread it. They can say, when I say this, I mean this. They can use it to clarify their thoughts, right? And I was thinking, just to close, the technicians of the no theater, those that they are there. This guy that is on a stage, just accommodating the costume and helping the actor with the costume, and he's as much part of that performance as the actor right there. He's fully understands everything that has to happen, and that will be like an example of that. But yeah, I will reiterate, the right of of the spiritual contribution, because the good thing about Michael Chekhov that I see is that it's good for actors. It doesn't damage them like other techniques and stuff, right? Nobody, it might not do, the only thing that it can do is good for you, right? But it's not gonna do bad for you.
Yeah.
But I think some of the process of the business and the all of that, they can really damage technicians mostly, and designers as well, and bringing that safety net, it's like we're talking now a lot about intimacy training to protect the actor. So what's the ethical protection safety net for the designer to try new things, to bring up, instead of getting that thick skin of, here come the actors to the theater, oh my God,
Yeah.
no, so yeah, very good, Charlie. Yeah, you summarized it all. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Midas, I would love to be in touch with you too.
I'll make sure everybody's in touch.
Perfect.
Huge
Thank
pleasure to meet you.
Same.
Yes.
Guys.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. So I would like to talk about, jump in a little bit and go to the some specific concepts about the Chekhov technique, and that were prompted by a question and exchange that Mavis and I had about the psychological gesture, for example, and
Yes.
about some specific techniques. So I too had made notes, and my notes really you guys all shared many thoughts that I also have, and it's that sort of concept for the live event technician, that these live events have happened from the cave to the Coliseum. They've happened from the church to the cabaret. They're on stages all over, and have been throughout all of humanity's existence on this planet. And they have always been inspired by the unity of the ensemble that brings them together. And if we always hold, as Mr. Chekhov does, the importance of the audience, the spectator, and the unity of what is brought to the spectator with the aims and the purposes of those who bring the offering to the spectator, to the audience. And that when a technician can understand this unique creative artist and this individuality and this spiritual current that drives us to bring this, to make this connection with the audience, then we have some really strong fundamental tools like atmosphere, which of course an organization like Cirque du Soleil, the shows like Cirque du Soleil are very atmosphere intense.
Yes.
Intensive. And when we understand that the atmosphere is the most unifying aspect, it's the soul of the story that's being told, we know that that's what permeates and lingers with the audiences for the length of their life. Really, when you go to a great concert, you go to a great ball game, you go to a great opera, even a great rally of some kind, there's an overall vibe to the event that has drawn the person there, and that shows up in the very first design of the public relations right? So everything from your graphic artists to those who literally print those papers or transform those JPEGs into, memes or whatever the technology is, are going to really want to understand the fundamental concept of atmosphere and how it permeates every element of the form and can be enriched through the creation of every aspect. And then specifically, we were wondering about the nature of the PPEs and just understanding these fundamental concepts of how expanding and contracting happens in the music, in the visuals, in the staging, in the construction of the props, the costumes, the set pieces, every aspect, and how this movement through the tensions of earth, water, air, and fire, the qualities of movement, how when a production takes the audience on that ride through all of those, how impactful it is for the spectator, and understanding how gesture, how the story pushes and pulls, how it lifts and smashes, how it gathers and tears and throws and penetrates, how it drags and how it reaches. Are it, those gestures are happening in every element of the production, the entire mise en scène. And so when a technician and a designer, when they understand that these principles are living through the whole process of the storytelling, they can lead their imaginations, like we were saying, Pablo was saying, how we need to build the muscles of the imagination through these questions. Where does this show expand? Where does it contract? Where does it mold, float, fly, radiate? Where does it push? Where does it punch? Where does it pierce? And so what is the as you move on, where do the tensions rise and fall? Where do they balance? Where do they have moods, qualities, the range of the emotional flow, and the dynamic tensions, the tempo, rhythm changes, the changes in the lighting, the changes in the music shifts, the light motifs, the subtle mechanical sounds, the quality of the bell, for example, and how the quality of that bell invites an expansion or a contraction. The rhythmic waves and repetitions, the crescendos and diminuendos that manifest in color, and in color in the tone, hue, vibrancy, luster, luminosity, all these different layers, and the timbre and all the different qualities in the audio realm, and the tempo and rhythm of a light cue, of a scene change, the tempo and rhythm of the line and form of the set itself, every aspect of design and the execution, the movement of the set itself becomes part of the creative act that deepens and enriches the atmosphere and drives the soul of the story forward. And all of this is, of course, contingent upon understanding what we call the synth analysis.
Yes.
Of the story, really understanding the structure, the arc, the 9 events, the opening and the closing events that happen in our imagination solely, and that set up the dynamics for the story being told, when all the technicians and all the designers and all the actors and directors and staff are on board with what those are. They have the ability to multiply by many more than just the number of, artists collaborating. The collaboration expands in a quantum kind of way. And the psychological gesture, finding the psychological gesture for the production to the spectator. What is the gesture between them when the technicians understand the gesture of this story's desire for the audience? And then the gestures, understanding the gestures of each scene within and each moment, the central psychological gesture of the atmosphere of the set piece itself. Mr. Chekhov talks about the gestures of trees and the distinct difference, for example, between a weeping willow and a grand giant bur oak. Their gestures are extremely different. And this is the same, the gesture in a couch, the gesture of a staircase, the gesture of a picture frame. They are completely unique. Each form is unique. So the gesture inherent in the form and how it impacts the audience in all the audience's senses, which leads me to a very interesting thing that when we talk about the experience of the technical world, very often it is focusing on lifting the sensorial experience of the audience. And so it's often about what we see and what we hear. And it's often limited to those two senses. But in Michael Chekhov's work, and as we go more deeply into the work, so more beyond what we can do in just the Chekhov, training intensive, are expanding the definition of the senses to include 12 senses, not just what we smell and taste and touch and see and hear, but these deeper soul and spiritual senses, the sense of rhythm, that sense of the individuality, the sense of aliveness that we feel, the sense of cold and warmth in all its metaphoric and physical and kinesthetic expressions. These kinds of expanded appreciation of the senses and the expanded sense of color, and color as on all its levels of impact. What I was talking about the hue or the luster or the luminosity, the density of, the expanding and the contracting, the amount of flatness or shine, right, of something, and how this not only affects the visual, but how it creates a kinesthetic impact, how it creates a sense of vitality or death, how the luster creates a sense of warmth, or the flatness maybe a sense of cold, on the metaphoric and kinesthetic realm. So when we, as designers and technicians, have a deeper and richer understanding of humanity's multiple senses that are not generally spoken about in the everyday world, we then can invite the question of how can I work with warmth, or how can I work with a human being's sense of aliveness? And this sense of aliveness, for example, the sense of inner well-being, is what Pablo was speaking about when you walk out dead and drained from a highly visual, exciting, powerful story, but you walk out feeling drained, versus focused, alive. So understanding that sense of creating a living production where the technology is living, that's when it contains this mystery that I loved what Pablo said about, do you want to just deliver that technology? Do you want to be part of the mystery, creating that mystery and delivering that mystery? And so these our goal, Mr. Chekhov's goal, when he talked about a theater of the future, he had all of his actors trained in all the technical areas. They all had to design. They all had to work with the design for the lighting, for the costumes, for the props, for the set designs. And his designers all had to participate in the acting training. And this process gave the actors such a rich respect for the creativity of the designers and the technicians. This understanding the sense of timing and rhythm that the Chekhov work really brings forward can make a whole difference on how someone pulls a hemp rope. I mean, when you're in an old hemp house and you have to pull a drape, or you have to push on, a set piece, that tempo and rhythm and the quality of that is just like Pablo was speaking about. It requires the art of that no theater artist, that from the no theater, that they train for years to be able to master this role of the technician there. And so we have as our primary goal as storytellers the task of what I call the big ask, which is to be able to access images, to be able to choose the great images, and then to be able, that selection process, the access and the selection, and then the conveyance, to get the image, to choose from all the images we can get, and then radiate, create, craft, get that image to the audience. And anything that can help those technicians and designers understand how the soul forces are built up of the thinking realm, the feeling realm, and the will force, how that process of thinking, feeling, and willing, the psychology of the stage, the psychology that is represented in colors that are thinking colors, in sounds that are thinking sounds, in lines, in the spiritual, if you understand spiritual geometry, how it affects the form, and this, in Michael Chekhov's work, he brought in eurythmy, which brings in spiritual geometry to be able to help the artists understand in their body. And that brings me to another thought about understanding the different learning ways, learning pathways for humans, beyond our format system we were speaking of, about why and what, and then how and what if. We also have those people who learn kinesthetically and create kinesthetically. And there are designers and technicians who have a feel. Like a friend of mine was the technical director on a show on Broadway before all this programming came. And he ran the board, all the sound lights, he ran it all without a book. He did not follow a script. He ran it through his kinesthetic forces. He knew the rhythm in his body. And that's a very different kind of technician than someone who follows word by word cues. And when a person follows a word by word cue, they get really into trouble when the word is not delivered, which means that, if an actor has a little shift in how they're speaking or delivering in a particular performance, then that technician is left without being connected to the flow. They can't improvise. So they have no jazz. We need to train jazz musician techies.
Yeah, and also that rhythm and feel when perhaps that board was programmed in Miami, Florida, and now the show is in Berlin, that feel and rhythm is not going to be the right feel and rhythm for that time and moment and that culture. And yes, to be in the moment is everything.
It's also an important driver on making certain that everybody is very connected to the story. Because if you know the story, then if the line doesn't come off correctly, you can do that. You can get that kind of kinesthetic feeling of, okay, well, this is probably about the moment that I need to do this based on what's going on in the story, versus, oh, I'm watching for the words. Nope, word, I'm not changing until I hear that word. So it's really, I'm kind of a hybrid tech in that I am very much attuned to enjoying knowing what's going on in the script, but there's also this overwhelming need to just feel the story of unfolding and letting the tech work be driven by that.
Yeah. And it's really exciting when our technicians can understand what the essential archetypes are that are living in the world. So this concept of archetypes, as we experience them, as archetypal gestures, archetypal movements, but archetypal energies in general, these forces of good and evil, understanding these forces of good and evil, understanding the laws of composition, the triplicity, the polarity, and the art of transformation, knowing to ask these questions, understanding that all performances must be full-bodied performances, the beep that we work with. The production itself is its own spiritual being that has to be full-bodied, and every element of tech is part of the body, as part of the body of the show, and understanding that every part of the body has to have a unified field of focus toward that aim. And that's where things like the focal points come in, and understanding, just jumping back to, for example, molding, flowing, flying, radiating, the element of water. And we understand that water is always H2O, right? But water as H2O, that's the technical thing about it. But water, where is water? Water lives in the air. It expresses itself in the air. It expresses itself in the earth, right? It expresses itself in light. And so when we understand that there is water, for example, the archetype of water, this archetypal element of water, has as many creative expressions as it manifests in everything. So to understand these very basic fundamental elements, so that when a theme arises, that, for example, if there's I remember one of our certified teachers did a production of The Seagull, and she got an image that was kind of a swirl, and it was a flight pattern of a seagull. It was a flight pattern, basically, of a seagull. And that wound up appearing on a very subtle level in the roof line of the little theater they set on the shore. It wound up appearing subtly in the desk office setup. It wound up appearing in costuming. This image, and it appeared in the graphic design. So this image became a metaphor that was reflected in all the technology. And it was, in effect, the psychological gesture of the production.
Yes. Okay.
So these are, when we train ourselves as an ensemble to be a 360-degree artist, We will enable that, what Pablo said, we will activate the ownership of the technologist's spiritual contribution. And what he was talking about this Title IX and this intimacy and things like that, these rights and fairnesses and protections, this suggestion that when you work with the beef, with the beauty, the ease, the entirety, and the form that Charlie was talking about, when you work with that real sense of contact ensemble, and that I am a creative artist and I see you, that sense of the other and honoring and being in contact with the other, the way Chekhov really invites us to respect and honor the other, your ability to work in intimate situations comes so naturally and easily. And the need to train people to respect each other is built into Michael Chekhov's lectures on love, on the power of that radiance and contact and that openness. It starts right from that ball toss. It starts from everything is perfect. Let's, when it drops, there's the crisis. Let's accept it. Let's collaborate. Let's open our hearts to the reality of what is and allow new information to arise. So these are all elements that I wanted to reinforce and open up in regard to my thoughts about the why Michael Chekhov's technique can be incredibly valuable, especially for such a school as the one that is opening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that I got from that was an aha, as often happens when I listen to Lisa talk. Relates to the fact that we are now all being challenged with the idea of how to create artistry that involves body, voice, and spiritual energies in the realm of PPE and all of the various requirements that a facility or a location or an event requires or whatever. And it occurred to me that we can position those as a manifestation of veils in the terms of or in the forms of veiling a performance, veiling something that we're doing. We do that through all of our exercises. We learn and play with and try different veiling levels on most everything that we do. If we look at the idea of a mask, wearing a mask, that's an incredibly out front, visible veil that you have to deal with, not unlike having to be inside of some kind of a massive costume. And yet you still have to get your energy out into the audience. Otherwise, you're just a mechanical place on the stage or whatever. And so the challenge for the tech is to try to make that process as simple and easy as possible for the actors. But as well, it's also important that the actors realize that they're being, their veiling is being enforced for them. And this is the time where they have to recognize that the only way that I get out there entirely is if I make certain that I am at my maximum expanded energy level as I'm putting it out there. And so one of the things that a director of tech and a director of acting can do is to make that process part of the rehearsal and make it part of the process, is that you have to be able to make certain that your energy level is being put out there with every possible thing that you can. It's very similar to, how do you feel? How is it that you somehow or another intimately feel the energy from, somebody like Anthony Quinn through a small close-up screen of his eyeballs? We all have experienced that function, that it is so powerful that we are emotionally overcome by it. And that has to be put into place throughout. We might say, well, he just has some kind of a magical power. But what we know in our training is where he got that power, which was, I know how to, make certain that regardless of how much of my personal presence is being transmitted, I am putting out maximum energy through whatever that veil is. And I think that's an area that's a specific technical challenge that we have to deal with now, and an area where we can really help the world figure out how to do that.
If you were training technicians in this, essentially in this chart of, would you train them in the same way that we did by giving them a short scene to memorize, characters to play, like training them, like say when you were training your designers, would you be training them in the same way for them to try out the tools, whether they be focal points, atmosphere, on the lines that they had learned?
Mm-hmm, yes. I remember when Pablo came, he was self-conscious because of being a designer and not being an actor. And do I really have to do it? This
Right.
question, do I have to do the scene? And yes, absolutely. The sense of play that he was able to find, just as an example of, I really loved what Pablo said about meeting them where they are in the beginning.
Yes.
And having that, really opening up that conversation about, do they want to be part of the mystery? Is that really what they're there for? Do you want to be your own little star who's the spiffiest light designer, around, who, doesn't know anything about how to really become part of the mystery? Who do you want to be? And when, because if you want to be part of the mystery, you want to know this work.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason to learn why you're here is to be part of the mystery.
Yeah.
Right? To take your skills, your gifts, your talents, and your technical abilities and raise them to a higher level that is beyond the conscious perception, right? It moves into mystery. And when you get that buy-in, then coming in with the same sort of, it's perfect, just understanding the vulnerability that they will inevitably feel, right?
Yes.
And and then working, and you might begin with a monologue first rather than throwing them right into a scene. So just so they get accustomed to getting their vocal work and their movement work united.
Yeah.
And they don't yet have to be interdependent with another human being. They can focus on creating their relationship with their imagination and expression there.
Absolutely.
Mavis, when we do foundation course on a weekend or something, we actually use Spooner monologues as a general rule, because they're so simple and easy to learn, and easy to learn how to express. But there's a lot of challenge in, creating that individuality for that. It's not so much about the learning the lines as it is about understanding the nature of storytelling and, the idea that you are part of that story, even if you're pulling cables behind the scenes, that you are part of that story. And you'll notice that in our synth analysis nights, that it is strongly urged that the entire production crew, top to bottom, all encompassing, everybody is actually part of that first section, which is, developing the themes and developing the ideas and developing the overall PG of the production. Yeah. It may be that a tech may then go on to do some other things and not worry so much about, okay, at act 2, scene 3, third line, we're going to shift, to a general atmosphere of, funeral home, in the garden kind of thing. But as long as they are connected to and constantly reminded of the overall general PG for the whole production, then they can then begin to feel like they are part of the whole process. And learning those lines, even if there's just a few of them, kind of gets them into the idea of storytelling, what that involves. Mm-hmm. I think being part of that, significantly improved my understanding of the technical production process over the years. And I think I strongly urge that every technical person in a class get the opportunity essentially to tell their own story.
What came up for me when you said that, Charlie, was I was thinking that just like the words came to my mind is like that to say to a young technician, you're not an actor, but you have to be a storyteller. You have to be a storyteller.
Yes.
And that's where that line has to be drawn.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh my God.
And one of the things that we do with that, with those Spoon River monologues, is we create that ensemble presentation piece that includes the Japanese rock garden.
Yes, that's right.
Forms, and where everyone, like the beauty, ease, entirety, and form exercises we do with the chairs, right? We build from those chair exercises into moving random objects and set pieces, and redesigning the set and redesigning our physical forms, moving from a spontaneously created Japanese rock garden, which is held, and then someone breaks out and does their monologue, and then it's sustained for a moment, and everybody moves to a new form. Mm-hmm. And they can move the set pieces themselves, or they can move their bodies on the set, trying to engage with the rock garden principles, engage with the psychology of the stage principles, and focal point principles, and you wind up, if you have 10 classmates, they go through one at a time their monologues, changing the form of the ensemble rock garden in between each monologue. And then they all go again and do the monologue in a very opposite kind of way. And we have them enter the stage as an ensemble singing Amazing Grace in an atmosphere of a funeral dirge. And then by the time the last person has completed their second version, which is we invite them to use a victorious kind of version for the second one. Mm-hmm. Everyone at the end bursts into a jazzed up version of celebrating their their transformation, of Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
So it's got a story as a whole. It's got the feeling of the whole, and it's got this transformation, and everyone's working on the forms, and so I think that would be a particularly effective way of engaging their design minds on a in a kinesthetic level, and helping them build that sense of ensemble, feeling of the whole, having to listen, and if they need to and they have struggling with memorization, they can always hold their lines, so it's always perfect. And if they forget their lines, they just they break out of their form, they start delivering their monologue, and they get 2 sentences in and they are blank, and they just sustain their blank, and they start moving. Everybody moves, and they pretend that was all they meant to do.
Crisis that we're going to work with. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is a dynamic piece of devised theater. And it happens spontaneously in the moment of actually performing. You have a general form that you're going to create the performance from, but as the performance begins, it is completely spontaneous. And so you're devising theater in the moment without directorial control. Everybody's doing it somewhat similar to how we do, the radiation exercise at the beginning of the performance. It just you feel your way through the whole thing, and that's a great thing, and that really leads to the whole idea that's been prevalent in a lot of more local productions, and now even a lot of production, professional productions, where the cast is the crew, or the cast is major part of the crew, and you just find extremely integrated in the moment ways of repositioning, pieces of the set without having to take a whole big break, to do that. It's very fun, and it's fun to do, and it's very interesting to watch.
And I don't know if you've seen some of the videos of these presentations, but there are some on YouTube, so I can send you the link for that. We can post it in the chat below the YouTube video. There.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, Mavis? Charlie?
When you're dealing with technical people, the questions are going to come up about the technical challenges that we are having to overcome in order to create this production. So obviously you always have, audiovisual technical issues. How are you going to do it? What are you going to do it with? How much money do you have to spend on it, et cetera. Yeah. You also have, the technical skills of people, and the various pieces of, are you going to use cameras, or are you going to use projections, or are you going to use, incorporate those somehow or another within set pieces, or almost create an online movie or TV show through the process, a live TV show. In addition, in today's world, you also now have the whole issues about bandwidth and connectivity arrangements, and you have how you're going to frame the video, not just for the local audience, but for a viewing audience that's out there watching on a computer screen. You've got to deal with the issues of streaming platforms, et cetera. And amongst all of those, I would say that the big question is, you've got to make certain that there are technical skills involved in each of those areas. There's no one person. I was this last weekend, I was probably one of 3 who could actually do, most of or much of the technical stuff that we were having to do. But I ended up being the only one who could actually make it all kind of come and work together. Well, that's not enough. You need to have some technical skills involved because nowadays the technical issues are extreme. And if you're doing something that is like a TV show, what you know is the moment that, the moment that the lights go on, all of your preparation is over, and now you're in a dynamic situation of having to do it live. And everything that occurs as a crisis in the midst of that and the time the lights go out is all got to be dynamically done on an instantaneous basis. That takes some skills that, that any group of people who are trying to create that production can do. You can't just say, oh yeah, well, Bob, he's got his own computer, and he's been working on it, for a couple of years. Let's make him the technical director. That you can't do that in this environment. As many of us, operate on Zoom, on almost a daily basis now, there are precious few and very, very, very few people who really understand the Zoom platform at a deep enough level that they can interconnect these things with live audiences and streaming platforms and all of this, and instead of using web cameras, you're now actually using professional cameras that are tied into the web. Those are technical issues that have to be kind of dealt with, and it's probably a good time in a class like you're having, like you're suggesting, to deal with some of that at some level.
Yeah.
It's dynamic, and so it's based on, where the production is and what their resources are and what the skills and capabilities are. But it's something that people really need to know, because what the production really needs is a person or two who can kind of see all of the elements coming together and make certain that through that whole conglomerate of huge challenges that have to be done, that somebody is maintaining the story, making certain that the ensemble is still safe. And so that's an area of real focus in training that I would suggest.
I got another idea too, from Charlie. You've sparked this, is for your POAs, for your, practice, observe, apply, your home play, to have your technicians look for, in their technical other tasks, their other classes, their other assignments for classes and things like that, to have them, for example, if you were teaching them expansion contraction, you would say, you look at all the different ways that expanding contracting expresses itself, and then ask them, when I teach, I say, where does this happen in the world, right? And I ask the students to tell me where. So here you can say, where does this happen in, for example, a concert? If you're running lights for a concert, where does expanding contracting happen? If you're creating a design for, a live fashion show, where does expanding contracting come into play, right? So, if you're doing sound, if you're operating the microphones, what is the equivalent of expanding and contracting on a, in the audio system? So invite them to do their, practice, observe, apply in, in whatever areas they are also learning their.
Yeah, I love that.
And there's a lot of POA opportunities on YouTube, and you can find some spectacularly well done productions there. People who have really done amazing, technical presentation through the challenges and created incredibly, deeply impacting stories. You can see, 1,000 times more productions, whether they're 1 minute productions or hour and a half long productions. You can see many, many, many more where you can tell in the first 2 or 3 minutes that nobody ever gave any consideration whatsoever to how this thing would actually come across to a person sitting at a computer instead of sitting in the theater. And those are POA opportunities that you can say, that really works, and that one definitely did not work. And you can, and it's pretty simple, you know, for you to begin quickly to say, well, this is why it didn't work, or that's why that worked. You can identify specific, you know, characteristics that are pretty easy to say, oh yeah, well, that was a, you know, right there that the actor was, you know, trying to contract or whatever, but the camera just expanded 100%, you know, and you can kind of tell the discontinuities, what, you know, the disclicks throughout a production that would cause it not to work. One of the most important ones is atmosphere. If there's no atmosphere in the production, people will never, ever, ever get the story completely. It won't mean anything. Yep. But you can see productions, stuff that comes out of NT Live is just blow away stuff. I am constantly amazed at how they can create a production that actually takes a full-blown physical in-person stage production and make it into a fabulous piece of video art, you know, on whether it's in a movie screen or a television screen. It's just, you know, I think there are people who have it and people who don't know how yet.
What did you say, Charlie? MT Live?
NT Live, National Theater Live. Look at some of their productions and you can just say, God, they know what they're doing. They really whether or not they have the same specific language that we have doesn't matter. You can tell, you know, you can see a lot of the Chekhov archival discoveries embedded in other people's, you know, creative individualities. They may not use the same words, but they get the same idea.
You know, there's an aspect of live event that where live event is broadcast, which may or may not be part of this particular training, but it aligns very much with what Charlie was talking about, the National Theater Live's ability to capture on camera what they've created during a live performance, and creating a catalog of wins and losses, of examples where it worked and where it didn't work, could be tremendously useful. And it really could be useful. I would love for that to become, you know, part of our design certification track in terms of having material to help teach designers these concepts and show examples of what works, what doesn't. I had a very specific example, and it's actually on YouTube. My production of Effie's Burning, Effie, Effie's Burning, and it's on YouTube, and it was great. Our theater was actually in a theater in Los Angeles where they taught on camera classes. So they had a built-in 2-camera setup, and the owner of the theater was kind enough to shoot it for us. And we got into that theater because the other actor, it was 2 persons, myself and the other actor, was a friend of his. And she had a very, very climactic moment. She has the big climax of the whole play. And he moved into a close-up for her big climax. And as a result, you cannot even see the climax, because the climax was a climax of the entire mise-en-scène as it was directed. Ultimately, she's been most of the time lying in a hospital bed, and for the climax, and she's in violet, kind of cold violet light. And for the climax, she's describing when she basically had a little sort of psychotic fracture and burst into flames and lit a house actually on fire from this spontaneous combustion rage that flowed through her. And as she tells the story, she literally stands up on top of the bed and does an expansion. She goes from this contraction in the bed, climbing up, and expands and opens her whole body out. And the lights turn to flaming red. And so on this stage, it's a very polar transition, a really powerful expansion, and that you want to see, you want to pull back and you want to see the wide shot. And he stayed and went into a close-up, so you don't even see as she stands up. It's like staying in a close-up here,
yes,
right? Instead of seeing this incredible expansion that goes full body, you barely even see that the lights have turned
from it affects the entire space.
From lavender to red. You can barely see it.
Wow.
So you see her performance, but you see this part of her performance, but the power of her performance was in her legs and in the outreaches of her hands. What impacted us as an audience was the spectacle from this contracted state moving into her full rage and transformation of power from this cold. This is an example of using cold and warmth, right? Yeah. In the energy, and the technology remained cold, right? The technician chose to stay in this shot.
Thus the transition didn't happen for the broadcast.
Right. Thinking that he was doing a favor for her. But not understanding, the elements of focal point, not understanding the element of heat and cold, not understanding the element of expanding, contracting, not understanding the climactic moment fully.
And that's probably attributable to the fact that the camera person was brought in at the last minute and was not actually part of the entire production from the first day.
Didn't know the story.
Yeah, and fundamentally didn't follow the story.
Yes. Didn't exactly. Yeah, I just give you an example for you to go look up, Mavis. Last year's production of Jesus Christ Superstar Live with John Legend, I think was maybe one of the most spectacularly filmed or taped, and it's taped now, obviously, but I watched it live. It most spectacularly produced live event that I've ever seen. It was amazing, and it was basically built from the very beginning. In its earliest design stages, it was built to be a live audience to a live national, global viewership. Mm-hmm. And so obviously that required that every single element of the technical aspect had to be there working from the very first moment. Yeah. And I just thought it was spectacular. If you can find that somewhere and watch it, turn your sound up really nice, and I think watch it on a big screen. I think it'll blow you away.
I did watch it live with the rest of the world, but where the rest of the country or wherever it was, I was one of the live viewers. So,
just luscious. It's luscious. It was a luscious tapestry of that whole production. And what I think amazed me was the fact that somehow how they integrated that set into the audience. And you were as the outside viewer, as this TV viewer, you weren't just watching from some distance like you were looking through a keyhole. It's like you were there moving around the stage, watching all of this stuff unfold. It was just beautifully done.
And had one of the most stunning moments I've ever seen on TV, which and they did pull to that wide shot when crucifix ascended, when Jesus ascended and retracted, and you saw this massive set piece, and you saw him disappear, and they left the screen white and silence. They let it radiate in plain white in silence.
I want to watch it again now.
A long time. And that was like, wow, there is a white blank scene radiating across the screen on national television for, I don't know, it felt, it was like 30 seconds or something. It was a long time in silence. And it was stunning because it really allowed the whole production to permeate us, and for us to just sit there in awe, receiving it. So
I mean, that was one where
great model.
The atmosphere comes through the screen. Absolutely. And it proves to people who say, oh, you can't get energy, you know, from here to there through all of this electronic stuff. If you're sitting in a screen watching that, you are getting every single instant of atmosphere that's coming out of that show. It's chilling.
So I think it'd be a great way to teach, to be able to show some technical events and give them an assignment to find, you know, have them do the work for you. Have them, you know, you come in with one or two examples and say, okay, you go find an example of, you know, an expansion contraction that works with the tech and the event, and an expansion contraction that does not work.
Yeah.
You know, so this kind of, I think these kinds of things will really get them to, you know, to buy into the information.
To apply the tools to their craft. Yeah.
Yeah. When they see evidence of it. Yep.
Thank you so much for this discussion today, for your time, for your energy, for your thoughts.
Thanks for creating the platform for us to, because we live this stuff every minute of every day and deal with it without thinking about the bigger context of it or whatever. And so your question has caused us to kind of think outside of the box and at what we tend to do and teach and practice ourselves.
I'm so blessed I have you to come to ask the question. It means so much.
It's Ensemble.
Yeah.
It is so amazing that Pablo was able to join us. That was
yes, incredible. What a fabric of artists and human beings involved in NMCA.
My favorite person is...
One minute on your imaginary bodies.